Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Rachel Tubridy. I'm the Managing Director of People Source, a finance recruitment firm here in Dublin. As many of you know, at this stage, we are the sponsors and have been for the last few years of these events with the young professionals. And we're only too delighted to continue doing so because they always have excellent subject matter. I suppose the topics are always very topical. And they've also got excellent speakers each and every time, and tonight is no exception. I'm really looking forward to this evening's event because there's two topics that are going to be discussed, and I'm hoping to be able to take away some nuggets that I can share with both my clients and candidates. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my contact details in the chat box, so if anybody has any recruitment questions, a client or a candidate, then you can contact me directly, not through this evening's event. So I'll do that, and let me hand you over to your fabulous host this evening, Peter Gillen. Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and hello everyone. Welcome again to this Young Professionals event. My name is Peter Gillen and I'm the Secretary of the Young Professionals Committee, and we're delighted to host you this evening. As I'm sure you've all noticed, the term ESG is thrown around a lot and has gone from a buzzword in business to the mainstream and now is an essential element of organization strategies. ESG refers to a company's commitment to do more than just make a profit, such as actively striving to contribute positively to the environment or social causes and to conduct themselves responsibly. The S in ESG stands for social and is the main topic of discussion for this evening. And this typically relates to the impact that a company has on its social environment in the community. We are joined this evening by a select panel of business leaders and entrepreneurs to discuss both what your business can do and what you as an individual can do to action positive social change in your workplace and community. So please be sure to interact with us during the event. Great to hear from you. We do have a Q&A button, so feel free to log your questions throughout the evening and we'll pose them to our panel in our Q&A session later on. So without further ado, the first of our speakers is Terence O'Rourke. Terence, a little bit of information about Terence. Terence is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ireland. He began his career in KPMG and later became audit partner, managing partner, and a member of KPMG's global board. Since then, Terence has sat on many boards and currently sits on the boards of the likes of the Irish Times and is the current chairman of Enterprise Ireland and the ESB. But that's not what we're here to focus on. It's his involvement with numerous charities and social enterprises that we'll be delving into this evening. He's a great example of an accountant who has given back to the community by getting involved in many initiatives such as Enactus, Enterprise Ireland's social enterprise work, and sits on the board of the Children's Fund for Health, which we'll get into shortly. So first of all, welcome, Terence. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Peter. Good to be here.
Fantastic. To begin with, I suppose, would you be able to tell us a bit about how you first got involved in these social or charitable initiatives years ago that were, I suppose, outside your core job? Like, was it someone that you already knew were involved in them, or was it off your own initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't so sure I was doing anything kind of special, as in I'm doing something outside my job, because if I think about this, it probably goes back to the time when I was a young fella. My dad was in the local Vincent de Paul, so we would have been going around and bringing chickens and turkeys at Christmas and things like that, and bags of coal and all the rest back in Mona in the 1960s. And then I was in a Vincent de Paul as well when I was in school. We had a Vincent de Paul conference in school as well. And then when I went to UCD in college, joined a youth club in Rathgar. So this is the kind of people from the Flats, not Mines and all the rest. And it was a youth club. I didn't know what they were at the time, but there was a bunch of us in UCD decided to do that. And I did that during the time in UCD, and then when I joined SKC, now KPMG, in the mid-70s, I would have continued in the youth club as well. But there then becomes a time when the exam pressures get to you, and then you start kind of having dates and things like that as well. So the old time for the youth club got squeezed. So, and the time I qualified, then I went away to the US for a couple of years, and that's kind of stopped then. And then I got married and kids and all the rest. So it took me a few years after that to get back into volunteer work. But it was something that was always in the back of mind, and I enjoyed it. I didn't do it because I felt I was giving back or I was doing something virtuous or something. It was just because I enjoyed it. It's something. It's a difference. It got your mind in a different space and all the rest. So so I enjoyed it, and it was good for me, and I like doing it.
Fantastic. They're all fantastic reasons. And I suppose I'm trying to think of the people who are listening to us this evening, and indeed the recording in the future. what advice would you have for someone who's watching and listening and who wants to get involved in volunteering with, be it a charity or just a social organization they care about, but doesn't know where to start? What would you say the first step they should take?
Well, I mean, Young Chartered Accountants is a social organization, Peter, so I mean, you can start there. I mean, I think just dive right in. I mean, I think sometimes people may be a bit nervous about who they're going to be, but I mean, you know, I think our lives are such that we probably need a bit of diversity ourselves and a bit of different mind spaces and things that stretch you in different ways. So I think, and then there's just I mean, there's so many issues. You know, there's volunteer work all over the place. Sporting organizations, volunteer work, and that can be also socially very effective as well. Then all sorts of, you know, whether it's working with, you know, often things that chartered accountants get involved in, we end up doing two things. And one is kind of educational things where, like reading clubs for kids and things like that, or helping people who are disadvantaged, mentoring them and all the rest. And then also the treasurership is the other good thing, you know, so the poor chartered accountant gets burdened with, would you ever keep the books for this volunteer organization? That's a typical thing. But in terms of I mean, there's Volunteer Ireland, there's Board Match, which is an organization which matches people who want to volunteer for work, for boards and gets them involved. I know in KPMG, there was a very active program where there was one person whose job, Queen O'Halley's job, is kind of now corporate citizen, was kind of ESG kind of stuff, and she would match people in the firm who wanted to do volunteer work with lots of people knocking the doors of KPMG for, have you got somebody who could help us out in an organization? So I think, and many companies nowadays have that, because ESG is part of lots of corporate agendas nowadays. And I mean, and some of the organizations have been involved with some of the attractions for a company, let's say sponsoring an Actus, which is to promote social enterprise in university students. They want programs where their people can volunteer and can get involved, where the employees get involved. So the easiest place to start is probably within your own organization. If you're an employee in somewhere in that organization, somebody else is doing it, somebody else will be supportive of you doing it, and somebody else can help you take that first step. And then no doubt also in the wider Young CA network, or the chartered accountants, whatever. I mean, chartered accountants also, I think CAI themselves would get requests from people to help and find if you've got somebody to volunteer. So if you knock on the door of CAI and say, can you, I'm interested in doing some volunteer work, I'm not really sure, I don't want to do much, I want to do an hour a week, can you get me something just to put my toe in the water? I'm sure either CAI or your employer or, our volunteers are in lots of places you can go and get help to start on that road.
Absolutely, and I can throw the Institute's Young Professionals group into their hat into the ring as well. If anyone's listening and wants to get involved with the group, please do reach out to us anytime. So no, thank you, Terence. That's interesting. I suppose one thing I think a lot of people are conscious of, they think, oh great, I have one or two organizations or charities in mind that I would love to get involved, but you know what, I don't think I have the time. They're probably looking for an incredible time commitment, whether, and people just, I don't know, think of huge workloads. What would you say to that? For example, out of interest, just from your own experience, how have you tended to manage your time with your career?
The answer is obviously badly, because I'm doing too much, So, so I mean, I think you should go into it with a very clear mind. I mean, I think you should kind of set the boundaries. It's important, the boundaries. People are looking for volunteers to help, and often they themselves are kind of, if you're kind of an administrator or the leading light in an organization, you can often be very heavily burdened. So you will take as much time as people will give you, right? So and those kind of people asking for help, they don't say, just give me a little bit of your time. They say, give me as much of your time as you give me. But I think if you're volunteering and you're helping, and it's something that strikes you, so you can help, but you want to set boundaries to it, then be very clear at the very beginning. I can give 1 hour a week. I can give 5 hours a month, or whatever the criteria is, and be very clear. And most organizations are very happy with that, because they know where they stand. I mean, the thing about volunteering, it is volunteering, and often life does intrude. So you can say, well, I don't have to do that this evening because I've got something else come up now, I can't do it. But you should really try and commit to it. And if you're going to be, if you're in a conflict, you're saying you're having to kind of not live up to your commitments, then that's bad for you. You'll feel guilty about it. The people who you volunteer to would say, this person's not doing what they should be doing. So don't overcommit. And by but if you're in any way doubtful about this, go very light and very slow and very, very, what you can definitely commit to. And if your life is busy and you have other things like sport and friends and all the other things that capture our activities, then, obviously try to get as flexible. If somebody wants you, like we want you every Monday evening at 7 o'clock, that mightn't suit you because some Mondays you have other things on. So you should try and negotiate that at the very beginning, and don't commit to something where you think, okay, this is going to cause me a problem. But I just say yes for the moment because I like these people and don't upset them. Do upset them. Be very clear at the beginning. Set out your boundaries, set out your territory. And then if the thing works, you're really enjoying, you can always ramp up more. It's more difficult to go the other way around. If somebody who dives in and wants to give 4 hours a week and keep the books and all the rest, and then you get busy and you can't do it, getting out of that is trickier. It's easier to ramp up than ramp down. So start slowly and start by setting clear boundaries, is my advice.
Perfect, thank you. I think it's really helpful. Again, it sounds like it's all about that initial conversation, same boundaries, and then keeping clear lines of communication there afterwards. Because like you said, circumstances change, life throws things at us that even for a multitude, we may not have the same level of capacity, and start small. No. Then perfect. And then just moving on, then I suppose when you reflect on the organizations you are involved with and have been involved with, do you mind me asking what's tended to attract you towards them? I know, for example, you referenced Vincent de Paul when you were a teenager, doing it with your dad. For example, was it those personal links, or would you say like a passion for what the organization does is essential, or are there other aspects such as simply wanting to get board experience that people should?
Yeah, I think probably the people you're sharing time with is very important. So I think if you find yourself a bunch of people you don't get on, they don't get you, that's not a very pleasant place for anybody. So I think almost more importantly than like, I have a passion for education or for being a treasurer or for helping disadvantaged youth, whatever it is that you have a passion for, I think that's less important than making sure that it's a group of people that you can work with, that get on with you, that you get them and they get you. So, that the volunteering can be a trial basis as well. So obviously a sector where you think you can add value, where you can help, that you've got an interest in, environmental charity, whatever it is, that you're something that works for you. I think that's obviously the place to start, is somewhere that you know something about, that you feel comfortable in, that maybe something you professionally or you have a hobby in it or something over the years. But I think you could also experiment as well. I want to say, listen, I'm not sure this charity is for me, but I don't know, my dog in the background now. But if I hope that let's see, I'll give you 3 months. Let's see how 3 months works out, and then they have a very clear understanding that you can walk away in 3 months, and you have an understanding you walk away in 3 months. And I think then at that stage where you really want to work out whether you want to work with those people and meet with those people and get down brass tacks with these people, that's pretty important, I think, as well. So I don't think it matters hugely. I don't think you say, well, what was the best place absolutely that I can, then you spend half your life researching things and working out X or Y. I'd say just dive in and something that might just grab your attention even slightly and just see what that's like. And then you'll find out pretty quickly what's good and bad. I mean, the other thing I would say in terms of picking an organization is you do have to do some due diligence, because there are lots of people on life who want to do good and all the rest, but some of them are not good administrators, or some of them are not careful about what they do. I've seen situations where somebody's joined a board of a charity, and that's one I know many years back was a drugs charity, kind of people suffering, want to get drugs rehabilitation and drug prevention, all the rest. It's not a fantastic thing to do in Dublin in the 90s. But the guy who has very passionate work with, he had no idea of administration. And the people who got involved with him didn't realize this. And he went off and he hired people, paid them some money, didn't pay the PAYE. The organization was left a big PAYE debt. And that's not a situation you want to be in. So you do need to be careful about the kind of organization you're joining, and be understanding that some of the people who can be very passionate, can be very inspirational in terms of doing social good, or also can be risk takers. And you need to be careful about what kind of risks you're taking. And I mean, that's obviously built into us as chartered accountants. We are on the lookout for risk all the time, but I think you should be aware of your own personal risks as well. Not a reason not to experiment, not to dive in, but I would caution people that not all the people who are doing good in the world are necessarily good people, if they call it that. So you need to be careful out there as well, and just be aware of that. It's the same in life any time. That nice person you're walking home with late at night, sometimes is not such quite a nice person. So you need to be careful out there.
Fair. No, I think that's a very valid point. And would you suggest doing a combination of your own research online, but also before committing to anything, just having an initial conversation at coffee with someone? Yeah,
absolutely do that, and then ask for things like documents. I mean, ask for things like the accounts, whatever they are, and ask for things like the constitution of the organization. And it depends on the size. Obviously, there are different sizes of voluntary organizations, but anything of medium upside size should definitely have regular good accounts. It should have and a good governance. If there's a board involved, that the board is properly constituted, there's a mix of skills, some experienced people on the board and all the rest, not all newbies, not all like yourself. If you're a new person and you turn around the table, you look around the table, everybody's never been on a board before and doesn't know what they're doing. That's probably not the one to start on. So I think, due diligence also comes naturally to us as accountants, and say, don't be over diligent. But I think some due diligence, as in meeting the people and checking out, kind of Googling all the normal things. I remember coming across another guy, and he was a really fantastic guy. He was helping handicapped adults, people who could not live on their own, and he had a bunch of them living in his house, and he wanted some money. And I Googled him, and it turned out he'd been involved in some cults beforehand. Right now, it sounded like he was recommended to me by somebody, another chartered accountant who was a great guy, and said, "Would you ever help this guy out?" And I realized afterwards that, I'm glad I Googled that, because it was just, if I hadn't Googled it, I would have met the guy, who'd gotten referred from somebody I trusted. And I went back to that guy and said, how could you refer that person to me? He said, well, that's all behind him. He's over that cult thing. He's all right. He's no problem. But I'm in engaging with him, I'm glad I knew the background, what was on Google, what was on the historical record. So you need to know who you're dealing with, and do your due diligence. Don't just dive in. Be careful and be cautious.
Absolutely. Sounds like a bullet dodge there. Oh, okay. And I suppose round up this segment, if it's okay, what do you feel, I suppose, are the main benefits of being involved in be it a charity or a board, for I guess you as an individual? What have you found? What have you got the most out of?
The thing I just as different people, and I mean that's the bit that I've always enjoyed in my career, is just working with great people and working and having interaction and seeing different people's approach to different problems and seeing different ways people have of solving them, and then getting the achievements of a problem solved and a progress made and all the rest. So I think that's the main benefit, is that you're making a difference, you're making an impact. And that means going back to my earlier comment about you need to be careful with your time, but you probably need to give enough time that you can actually feel you're making a difference. Because if you are dipping in for an hour a month or something, you're probably not, you're not contributing hugely, you're not changing the world. And I think personally, you get more satisfaction of being able to see that because of something you did, you solved a financial problem, or you helped somebody who was in difficulty and they weren't sure of their way, and somebody else that you come across, either a beneficiary of the charity or somebody else involved in the charity, maybe an employee member or something like that you can help them. So I think just making sure that the organization has your impact, and that you're making an impact on that organization for the better. I mean, one of the other benefits of being on a board as a chartered accountant, I mean, obviously, let's say in KPMG, and I'm sure lots of firms, we're not allowed to be on kind of commercial boards. So you can't go off and be you have a buddy who's doing he's a tech startup or something, and he wants you to be on your involvement, but you can't get involved in those boards. But there comes a time in your life when you may want to get involved in boards, and a chartered board is a very good way of finding board experience, of finding board disciplines, chairing meetings, audit committees, approving accounts, all the things that go with board disciplines and board governance procedures. You can learn all those in a charity, and it's a very good way of, when you come a time in your life and you want to get involved more deeply in commercial organizations, you'll find that the governance disciplines you've learned while you've been in voluntary boards can stand you in that way as well. So that's a good benefit. And the other one, and other thing you can do is I'm going to share now a screen to show you a photograph I got today of an event in Silicon Valley where the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar is having a trade mission with IDA and Enterprise Ireland at the moment. And this is a talk in Silicon Valley this morning in San Francisco with IDA Ireland, where they were showcasing Ireland, and they said the benefits of, and it's called Business Equitable and Sustainable Growth. The lady on the left there is Deirdre Martell, who is the CEO of the Rethink Ireland, or the Social Innovation Fund was called beforehand. which Rethink Ireland is partners with companies to raise philanthropic funds to address social issues in Ireland and social innovation. So there's the idea using Deirdre as a kind of part of the message of Ireland to companies that they're trying to attract to Ireland, say Ireland's a good place to come. So it's not just the commercial things we do in Ireland, but it's also the voluntary things we do in Ireland, the way we are tackling issues in Ireland together, using some business skills along with the people who are passionate about social issues. So that combination is a good combination for Ireland. So you not only get personal satisfaction out of it, I think you're doing the country some good as well if it all comes to good, if it all works. So they're the benefits I see involved in getting involved in social activities.
Well, thank you so much. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your insights, Terence. Unfortunately, I suppose just for the in the interest of time, we'll have to park this part of the conversation for the time being, but you'll be back with us for the Q&A session. I
can see some questions coming up. Yes, so look forward to that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, and absolutely, as Terence said, we've already had a few questions come in, but feel free, absolutely. I'd encourage anyone who's with us this evening to submit your questions indeed, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the Q&A session later on. But now on to our esteemed second speaker, Nuala Murphy. I invite you to join Nuala. I suppose just again a little bit about Nuala. Nuala started her career in sales and marketing before then taking the leap into entrepreneurship, and now she is a multi-award-winning entrepreneur from Belfast. She's the current head of business for the Diversity Mark, which no doubt we'll discuss very shortly. Some of you listening may also be familiar with the Lean In movement, which was founded by Sheryl Sandberg. Nuala founded the Lean In chapter for Ireland, in fact. And layered across all of that, as if that wasn't enough, Nuala has also always been a big advocate for gender equality, amongst many other things. To be honest, I could go on and on again, but we'd have no time left for a chat. So
connect on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for having me, Peter, and for those that have attended tonight.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I suppose to begin with yourself, for those of you who are with us who may not be aware of the great work that the Diversity Mark do, could you please tell us a bit about it, please, and what the motivation for its inception was?
Yeah, so Diversity Mark is the awarding authority for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. It originated out of some industry leaders who came together to form a charter mark nearly 5 years ago now. And then it has since become part of the Women in Business group of companies as an operating nonprofit that is working with organizations to help them on their journey to building better organizations regarding diversity and inclusion. It's an independently assessed accreditation. So myself and my colleague Emma, we work with companies to understand how they can get started, steps they can take, what the process looks like, guide them on the framework and the structure. But ultimately it comes down to an independent assessment panel who I suppose go through your application to see if you really are walking the walk. And that's a retention. So it's reviewed every year, and based on that review determines whether you can move to the next stage. So there's 3 stages: bronze, silver, and soon to be released gold. And at each stage you focus on different goals throughout the diversity and inclusion spectrum.
Very good. It must be just very gratifying, amazing to see as companies progress, I suppose, from your bronze all the way through. So I'd say that's fantastic. And do you mind me asking how you yourself got involved?
Yeah, so it was really interesting listening to Terence there, because how I got involved in diversity and inclusion came out of a lot of the work that I did in a volunteer capacity. And I think that a lot of the comments Terence made there about, finding an alignment with the work that's being done, doing your due diligence, boundary setting, and the impact that you can make. For me, it all started with the book, and it started with reading Lean In at the stage I was starting a family. I was always very much in a commercial role up until about 10 years ago. So my performance was judged on, my value was judged on performance. And it's really only when I started to have children that I started to feel some weirdness in the workplace as to what I should do, what people think I should do against what I wanted to do, which was to continue and build my career. And a friend gave me this book, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and I read it, and at the back, there was a piece to say, start your chapter. I'd never had an external network. I'd been an internal person in an organization, running a department, working towards business goals. And so I thought, I wonder if I could start a circle in Belfast, and, maybe I could rally a few people together Because what I learned when I read that book is with the challenges that I was facing in the workplace, and I'm sure it's very true for a lot of women or minority groups across the accountancy field, is that I thought it was about me. I thought the lack of opportunity, promotion, the comments, the behaviors of quite often being the only woman in the room most of the time was down to me. But actually this book gave me the data and the evidence that bias is a global issue, lack of representation, lack of equality and equity in the workplace. And that was liberating. And so from there, great things grew. We started off small. We had small circles, a leadership team in Belfast. Then we moved down to Dublin. Co-founder Breda McCaig, who some of you might know, we assembled a new team. We built that up. There's over 300 circles now across Ireland. There's 2 leadership teams. We've done amazing work. And that's where I suppose I'm a professional chartered marketer. I've helped businesses grow, sell products internationally for many years. But that's where I find my passion and learned a lot of experience that enabled me to be doing the work that I'm doing now and be qualified to do that work. And it was down to the network, and it was down to really focusing on where I can have impact, and that passion for equality, be it gender or across the board. I feel very lucky, Peter, to be working and getting paid for the work that I've been doing in the volunteer capacity for 10 years, but also that it's diversity and inclusion is so top of everybody's business agenda. And that's one thing that we can attribute to COVID and to the pandemic, is that it's shone a light on the inequalities in the workplace, regardless of the organization. So Diversity Mark is it's a great role, but it's a journey for all organizations to consider where they're at, where they want to go, what they can do with what they have to be better. It's not about one thing or another. It's about being better, because everybody has a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. And I love, and congratulations on finding that space that you feel fulfilled in as well. I think that's a really important, we all strive for it, but not people get to it with sometimes limited success. So that is fantastic. I suppose, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. It goes without saying, I suppose, that diversity, as I said, it's incredibly important, and it's on, well, if not, it should be on the agenda of every company these days. But I suppose just as an SME in this space, why for you, I guess, just for the audience, is diversity such an important and essential element of companies, and why should it be on their agenda as opposed to just necessarily more community or individual based problem?
Well, I mean, there's research that tells us why it's important to be more diverse, and not just to understand diversity is about the numbers, right? And inclusion is about how we get people to work together. So I think firms that have a more diverse board outperform those that don't. Companies that are building products, when they have more diverse product teams, are building better products that are offered to wider teams. There's a lot of examples, funny examples, the iPhone, the health app. There's no menstruation tracker in the first issue of the health app with the iPhone. Like, what's that all about? Had there been more thought into the needs of all consumers, then maybe that would have been different. So they perform better, they have better retention. Companies that put a focus on diversity have more productive teams, and staff want to work there and they want to stay there. And right now we are in the era of the Great Resignation, and it's a candidates market. So even if it's not that, just because it's the right thing to do, it's also very good for business, and those businesses that are more diverse and inclusive across the board perform better. And there's time and time again examples of organizations doing that.
Makes that perfect sense. Absolutely. Amazing. And then I suppose I'm just thinking, the people who are in fact listening to us this evening, and indeed again the recording in the future, hopefully, from a corporate point of view, what advice would you have for those maybe perhaps management and senior management in those companies who perhaps haven't yet considered the likes of diversity and inclusion, but would like to, and what first steps should they take? Like, for example, what resources are there out there to help?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing at the moment in my observations in this space, most recently, have been that there's a lot of fear because people don't know where to start, and they know they're either being reviewed or their performance is going to be judged by what they're doing in the space. I think it's really important to accept the fact that everyone can do something and can start somewhere. And my first protocol would be, come to our website, look at our global resources, see the reports that are out there, familiarize yourself with the state of affairs. you're all accountants, so you like data, you like understanding what the numbers tell you, and solving the problems around that. And I think that's a really, really great first point. What we do with Diversity Mark is we are very much happy to jump on a call and talk about examples of organizations that have started, maybe similar organizations of similar size, similar resource. What did they do to get started? Do you have a diversity and inclusion strategy? Do you have a diversity and inclusion working group? Do you have representation of the voices of all staff? Do you collect conversation? Do you have surveys? There are really good places to start. And in the absence of those, maybe think about, okay, we don't have a strategy. How do I get started? I'll go to this resource. I'll understand if others. I'll join an event, peer event, understand if other people did it. Take your time and do your research. Come back to what Terence said earlier. Do your research, understand what you can do with what you have, and reach out. We are here. It's my job to help and support that journey. And I'm more than happy to offer anybody a 30-minute call to run through how they can get started. No problem whatsoever.
That's great, because I was going to my next question. What if someone who is listening wants their employer, or maybe they're running the show, maybe they have their own company, what should they do if they were interested in the diversity mark? But you're saying simply reach out to yourself.
Yeah, reach out. I mean, even if like a direct call or what feels like too much now, when you just want to get a bit more information, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. We share a lot of good content there and examples, even to familiarize yourself a little bit with hot topics at the moment. We share a lot of content around why it's important to use pronouns. What is privilege? What is class? What's that role? What about race and ethnicity, disability? Where do they all fit? How do we think about them all at the same time to affect the change we need to see? And so we share a lot of content there that might give you a bit more confidence to book a call or to send an email. But ultimately, it's about if there's a will, there's always a way, and we meet you where you're at right now and help you get to where you want to go. And that's dependent on your size of organization, the resource you have, and your own goals. And that's where the framework really helps. It gives you a framework of goals to try and achieve.
Fantastic. So it's customizable to where you are on your journey, basically.
Yes, it's absolutely about your organization and your journey. It's not in comparison to other companies, because that's not fit for purpose. No. Everyone's coming at this from a different position, and they've done different. There are different stages. There's different level of expertise. If you're an SME, for example, you don't have maybe a DEI lead. You maybe even don't have a HR director. So that falls under somebody else's, or someone's doing HR and a bit of accounts and a bit of marketing. So it's really about understanding where you are and seeing where you can get started.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you. I suppose then, just taking a step back to you mentioned earlier the volunteer work that you would have done, for example, before your current role. And again, similar to what the question I posed to Terence earlier, I suppose, what advice would you have for someone who's watching and listening, who wants to get involved in an initiative? I'm sure you'll echo much of possibly of what Terence said, but for example, how did you go about? Did you just use your own initiative and jump out, or were you pulled into it by someone else?
So I'm a bit of a self-starter. So I sent an email to Sheryl Sandberg Foundation.
As you do.
And you'd be surprised if you do something like that, what you get back. It's always returned, and what's the worst that can happen? So, and I started a circle, and I got some guidance from the foundation on how to get a circle going, and the support, right? It's about the support and having the confidence, because they're in San Francisco, I was in Belfast, and I didn't have a network. So this is why it's so important, even your own network. It's, to launch a circle, bring a few people together. When it comes to your own volunteering, I would suggest that you go down the line of an area where you're interested. If you play sport, if you play music, if you've got children, if it's your first endeavor into volunteer work, of course you have to have the due diligence, and you want to make sure that your time is going to have impact, but also be mindful that you're going to do probably 3 times the amount of time you ever set out to do, or maybe accountants are better at managing that than I am. But for me to get lean in, set up and started and off the ground, it was almost 3 days a week on top of my own work and my own job and my own interests. But it was worth it, because now look what we've done, the amount of women we've helped, the amount of male allies we've recruited. And it's all ultimately led me to the role of my dreams, where I'm able to work in this space to help more people do that. So don't underestimate the value of the skills you develop as a volunteer. and unfortunately there's less value put on that time and effort, when actually it's probably sometimes more valuable and rewarding in a life setting than a lot of people's day to day. So I kind of feel very lucky that I can do both.
Very good. And yeah, I'd imagine it's often when we reflect back, it'll be those interactions that one may feel had the most impact, you could say. So absolutely, no, that's really interesting to hear. Thank you. I suppose, yeah, I guess again, just really briefly, because I just think that time management aspect is so important, because I really do think that's one of the barriers to entry almost for a lot of people to get involved in this area. Did you just go in with a very clear, were you as prudent as Terence with going in, oh, I'm only going to go in a day? I know you, for example, you said you ended up spending maybe 3 days on lean in, but how did you manage that as you went on? Was that just communication?
Yeah, so I suppose coming from the background, my background was, I was a chartered marketer, right? So I was used to, having plans and goals and assembling people, and communication is key. Yeah. Being transparent and also empowering other people to get involved. So giving them the opportunity to take the lead. As a leader, that was my role, to empower and enable other people. In the first couple of years, I probably took on a lot more. And I maybe didn't give other people as much an opportunity because I was so bullish at getting it off the ground and getting it going. But what that taught me was, it taught me a lot about my leadership style, my leadership skill, my areas for development. So it was a gift in its own right, And I think from a time management point of view, you hear people talking about passion and a labor of love. And I think that the reward that I got out of my labor of love and how it helped others and what other people got out of their time and effort in that, it's gender equality, right? It's pretty big stuff. It's about people seeing their value, finding their voice, being seen and being heard. That almost feels that you can't put a time limit on it, but I can appreciate that if you're joining another board and it's in your capacity as a chartered accountant, that you probably have to be stricter. It depends on the person you are, it depends on the work that you do, and it depends on how you approach life. One isn't better than other. It's really what you have to work out what's right for you and go with that.
Absolutely, makes complete sense. Well, thanks so much for that, Nuala. I guess I have one eye on the clock. I'm conscious of our time, so we might move on to the Q&A session if that's okay. And I'll also welcome back Terence into the fold if that's okay. So we have a lot of people listening in with burning questions. So we might burn into that, for example. So our first question that was posed to the group, for example, was, what advice would you give to someone pursuing accountancy if they want to steer their career into the direction of sustainability and corporate governance, and how can accountancy link in with this? Now, I appreciate that's a pretty broad question, but I'm not sure if either of you.
Yeah, I'll have a go at it. First of all, I think if you want to do that, I want to help kind of sustainability and climate change your thing, but you want to do it from the point of view of accountancy, I think the first thing you got to be is a good accountant. So I think you should just probably focus on the on getting your studies done, qualifications done, the business in the trenches of learning the practicalities of accountancy. Now, obviously there are part-time courses you can take. You can take evening courses, virtual courses, and all the rest. So you can do that in parallel. If you're good at both studying and working, you can add a little bit more, like a couple of hours a week on the old sustainability side, do a little bit of training of that, which do that. So I'm not sure if you're looking, you can, if you have to choose your employer, you hopefully choose an employer that's interested in the space and that might be able to allocate some work to you. But I think there is a role for an accountant, because obviously there's a huge amount of reporting, there's a huge amount of auditing, stop greenwashing, there's a whole pile of things that we as accountants can contribute to the efforts that society needs to take to be carbon neutral and to do all that stuff and get there, and help companies do that as well. And I think we can do that as accountants. We can really help there. So but I think you need to be an accountant first of all. I think you don't do a bit of sustainability, major in sustainability and do a little bit of accounting. I think you'd be a good accountant. I think to contribute mostly focusing on doing accountancy, getting that done, and then being able to use those skills with your other sustainability learning you're doing, and maybe taking some course in green finance or whatever to help better.
Absolutely. And actually, just to chime in on that, as someone who's actually working in that sustainability advisory space, the first thing I would actually recommend to people is actually just go onto LinkedIn and reach out to people. People are LinkedIn is there to be used. People talk about networking, and they don't like to do it, but that's why we have it. That's the purpose. So reach out. In my experience, people are only too willing to help. If not, jump on a, of course, people are busy. People will jump on a virtual call with you, if not meet in person for a coffee. But in my experience, I'd say I've never been turned down when it comes down just to a coffee about a career chat. So would highly recommend that. Also would recommend looking, there are online courses like Terence said. For example, I know SkillNet provide a few online courses, but there are also evening courses that many of the local institutes and universities provide that can cater around, whether they be evenings for several weeks, months, or even over a part-time course over 2 years. And also there are bodies in different various industries. So for example, I would mainly work in the funds industry and banks and banking and insurance. So the Green Team Network are a great institution for keeping on top of. Just follow these bodies on LinkedIn, read their thought leadership, get up to scratch on, oh no, I don't want to work in the regulation space. I want to actually work in an industry and I want to strive to be head of sustainability. Like, just get some direction, get information initially, and then from there you can make better decisions. But sorry, not trying to take over this at all.
I would add, Peter and Terence, what I would also add to that is, find someone who's doing the job that you think you want to do, and have a conversation. And a lot of the connections I've made have been based on that. Have a conversation, ask for advice, and that's how you start to build a network. Being part of a network and thinking properly about a network. Not networking has a horrible kind of association, but if you're thinking properly and strategically about where you want to be, look for people who are working and doing that job and reach out to them and ask. Particularly, when we know established networks, and for women it's harder, we don't have the same opportunity to network, we don't have the same established organizations, the old school ties and the privileges that go with just being a guy. Sometimes for us, it's for women in particular, or other minority groups, it's join the groups that might be able to then create that network for you and create those opportunities. And what's the worst that can happen? They say no.
That's it. You're nowhere off. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Perfect. Another question I actually just got in there, Anula, it's for yourself, I suppose. Yeah. Is it possible to get involved in Lean In? Is it possible? Is it for everyone?
Well, that's up to you to decide. Lean In is open to everybody, and they've done an awful lot of work to be inclusive across the board on a global context, and then also locally. It's a volunteer, self-organized led here in Ireland. Okay, so you have to manage your expectations. Typically what happens is you run events, but some established networks, like if you're up north, Women in Business, they also have their own dedicated Women in Finance, Women in Accountancy roundtables and networks that exist, so you can join on with them. And also you go to the website and you see what's right for you. I think that this is young professionals, so where you're at your career, your primary focus is your job and building your credibility and doing good work, but also you need to do a little bit of work on yourself to work out what's next for you. And when you do that and you identify where you want to go, then that's where when you go to the networks that are right for you. And again, it goes back to the research. Do your research, understand what's the right network for you, and then connect. I connect with everybody now. I remember hearing a speaker talk once, and they said, in your 20s, work really, really hard and learn from the best. In your 30s, that's an opportunity to try something new. And in your 40s, do what you're really good at. And, when I listened to that, it was when I was in my 20s. And I was like, yeah, I want to do what I'm good at. Now, I want to change the world. But now I'm in my 40s, I look back and I understand, learn, do good work in your 20s, learn from the best, get the best job you can, and then progress. And I think that's the same for the type of network or the type of voluntary or third sector community work you want to do as well. So hopefully you can join Lean In by going to leanin.org. You can join a network by going to Women in Business NI. Come and meet with me and I can join you into other ESG focus groups that I'm part of, because it's all evolving. And pay it forward wherever you can, at every stage, pay it forward.
Absolutely, pay it forward. Yeah, in my experience as well, what you put in, you get it back easily. And similar to what Terence said earlier, perfect. Another question I just got in there, and I'm not sure it's for either of you, but I'm not sure, Nuala, you might be more comfortable with it, is often when it comes to people are familiar with the term diversity and inclusion or D&I, but there are also a lot of other everyday terms, but people, like race, ethnicity, inclusion, diversity, all these things, it's a bit of an alphabet soup at times. That is there anywhere, like, what would you recommend for people who want to get their heads around, I want to make sure I'm using the right terminology, because people are trying to be very careful these days and respectful. What would you recommend?
So as we need to check our own privilege, and we need to check our own bias. If you can start there and appreciate that, coming at it from that avenue, you're going to make mistakes. If your intention is right, you're going to get where you need to, but you have to do the work yourself. We have our resources, as I said, Global Resource Pool. You can go there. We talk about these type of things. There is a lot of fear, but you're better doing something and trying something with the right intention than not doing anything at all, because that's not moving anybody forward. And I think it's really hard when you're part of that minority group, whether it's gender, whether it's race, ethnicity, to hear your identity being used as a percentage, or your identity being used as, it's something else I have to learn. And that's difficult. So try to, flip it over and take your privilege off and think about it holistically, and also do your research and inform yourself as a professional person in the current climate we live in. It's important that we all educate ourselves, and we all have work to do, and we all have our own biases that we need to work on. So check those, and go to Diversity Mark and check out our Global Resource Pool. We try to make it as relevant and current as possible, and it's conversational, right? So we want to break down those barriers, the fear. We want to break it down. We want to offer information so that you can then build in your knowledge and your tools to be a better professional, or just a better person in general.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, I'm afraid that we've run out of time, so I have to leave it there for this evening. But first, may I just like to thank Nuala and Terence for taking the time to speak to all of us this evening. I think everyone learned a lot about the impact that each of us can have in the social area of ESG, whether it be in the workplace or else in the community as well, and how we can be a real force for good. So thank you both so much for that. I really do appreciate your time. Also like to just very quickly thank Rachel Tubridy and PeopleSource for sponsoring this evening's event. We really do appreciate it, Rachel. Be sure to follow them on social media. Also, thank you to the Chartered Accountants Ireland for all of their ongoing support, and to Emma Billings in particular for her ongoing help and support with all of our events. And last but not least, thank you to all of you for tuning in. Be sure to follow Young Professionals on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn to get news on our upcoming June LGBT plus Pride event, which will be in collaboration with Balance, the new LGBT plus allies network within the Institute. So keep an eye out for that, please. It's also we're noting that the Young Professionals AGM will be later in the summer, in around August. So if you've been attending our events over the past while and like what we do and want to action some of the great advice that Nuala and Terence have given us this evening, please feel free to reach out to myself or with the Institute themselves via LinkedIn or email anytime. And we'd love to have you on board. I guess that's it. So that's everything, everyone. So thanks again for tuning in, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Peter. Nice to meet you, Terence. Hope to
nice
see you again in the future.
I enjoyed that. Thank you very much, Peter. Well done.
All the best.
Well done, Nuala.